Well, we're back at the Maggot Clubhouse down in the President's Room bar. I'm joined by Jim Beck, Bill Darling, two original Maggot members. Welcome, guys.
Good to be here.
Hey, let's start this by something I've been wanting to ask for a long time, and I haven't asked any of the other people. What's the origin of formal wear? How did that start, and what was sort of the genesis of it? Jim?
Boy, that's... I haven't thought about that. I have no idea.
Was it a planned thing, or did somebody just do it and then everybody kind of followed along, or?
Back in '73, when we lived on 7th Street, a bunch of us rented a house on 7th Street here in town. And we came up with an idea of, I think it was a pre-Christmas time, like mid-December, to have what we call a bottles party. Instead of drinking beer, everybody bring a bottle of something. Of course, you pass them around and mix them up and get pretty stupid. But somehow that morphed, or the vibe for that kind of centered on dressing up with what we call formal wear. And then that kind of hung with us, and then occasionally we'd do formal. We did an annual bottles party for a number of years, and then that kind of faded. But the formal wear thing kind of stuck with us for special occasions. I remember going up to Hoop Up Days in Lethbridge, and
that's first
that was a formal wear mandatory, at the party.
Okay. And was that the first Maggot match up there at that? We've talked about that.
Yeah,
in some of the others.
I believe it was.
Okay.
The picture that's on the web page.
Okay.
That's not the first time we played Lethbridge.
No, but that was the first Maggot match and Maggot formal.
At the party afterwards. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, we had a pretty good affinity with Lethbridge. They were kind of a lot like us, and we could play them pretty even. I think they beat us half the time. We beat them half the time back in the day, and plus, when I first started playing, they were our closest road trip.
I was going to say, who else did you guys play in those early days?
Oh,
Central Washington. Okay. Ellensburg had a team, and I don't know if they were full-on rugby or if they were one of the smaller schools that didn't have a spring football program, so their football guys played rugby in the spring.
Oh, okay.
They were tough. They beat us pretty hard most of the times we ever played them. Then I think they kind of graduated from, if I'm right, being like a semi-football, semi-rugby team, they graduated to full-on rugby program over there, and they were always pretty strong. They always had good talent.
Yeah, I remember going over there. They're always tough. Now, you mentioned this house on 7th Street. I've heard people refer to that as the first Maggot Clubhouse. Tell me a little bit about living there and what that was like.
Pandemonium. When I started, they already had it. You were there.
Giorgio. Cousin came on.
There was always room for somebody else, to the point that I think it was for Cousin's bedroom. Pigpen was working at the lumber yard, so we went over and paid for two 2x4s and got enough lumber and sheetrock to build a wall right in the middle of the living room, and right through the living room window. So we had another bedroom, but it was just kind of a rugby flop house. We had all the parties there, and traveling team stayed with us. But it was from when we were in school. We were all still going to school.
Yeah. And that's how it started, when you were playing for the U and living there. Yeah.
We were. Other than there was one guy living there, Mike. Remember? Mike. What the hell was his name? He was a non-rugby guy, but we let him live there because his girlfriend was real friendly to the rugby club. But the rest of us were half-ass college students at the time.
Yeah. On the 6-year plan kind of thing?
I was in and out in 4, but most guys took an extended tour.
And I see, it's funny, I was looking through some of the old things that Skip sent through some of the old Maggot memories and the Maggot newsletter kind of thing. And I saw that you were titled originally as what I think of now as must have been the first president for life. Of the Maggots. So what was it like running the club in those days, if that was what you were doing?
The reason that I had taken the better part of a year off trying to salvage my knees, and came back, and things were just kind of disjointed and loose, and I figured, well, you know, if all I want to do is play, and if we're going to be a viable team, we've got to be a little bit more organized and get a little bit more on the ball with things. And being near-terminal obsessive compulsive, it worked.
It helped, right? Somebody
these,
had to be the administrative arm of the club, because everybody wanted to do the playing and the partying, but nobody wanted to do that stuff, right?
And if you had something done, it was a lot easier to say you and you, and they always said okay.
Right.
They weren't going to volunteer, but they weren't going to say no.
But they would take directed commands. So in those early days, I know that you went to school here, and I know that you would not have seen much rugby before you came to the university. Do you have any memories of rugby before first seeing it at the university?
Zero. First rugby game I saw, I played it against Ellensburg.
Same with me. But
Here, it was a home game, and they beat us up pretty hard. That was the first game I ever know how to spell the word rugby.
Skip and I went to high school together, played football and wrestled together, and I fancied myself maybe a college wrestler, so I took off in Europe Bozeman a year at North Idaho, and kept in touch with Skip. And whenever I was in town, we'd get together, and I knew he was playing, and he'd tell me about it. And I said, that sounds kind of fun, but...
Yeah, that's not my thing yet. And then, how did you end up playing at first? What was the
I don't know if
impetus for that?
If Skip remembers this or not, but I was at North Idaho, and beginning to realize that what was always obvious, I had categorically no business in a college wrestling room. But me and another guy from Montana who was wrestling over there, we were on our way from Coeur d'Alene to Billings for the Montana State AAU tournament. And got to Missoula, and his girlfriend was here. And so we had to stop for a couple hours. So I just had him dump me off at my folks' house. And nobody home there. So I got on the phone, called Skip, and bullshit for a while. And he finally said, you know, you really ought to stick around. We got Lethbridge in town, we're short a few players. And I said, that sounds good, Skip, but I'm kind of committed to this. And so we talked for a little while. Okay, I'll see you when school's out. All right, bye. I sat down for about 30 seconds. Got back on the phone. Said, Skip, I'm 4 pounds over. This guy I'm with is a maniac driver. Pick me up this evening. And the next day I played in my first game.
That's awesome.
And never set foot on a wrestling mat again.
Nice. And you were originally a flanker, or you came to that position? Or?
No, I did what every
skinny, on the wing and...
skinny guy shows up and they put him on the wing. And Rex Thompson did the nicest thing I think any human being has ever done for me. On the first spring tour, I was playing at the wing, and we drew stand for the first round of the tournament. And about 20 minutes before start time at 8 o'clock in the morning, whenever it was, Rex came up to me and says, Jimmy, we're gonna move you to the forwards. Boy, well, okay, fine. Sure. And never looked back.
And then you were a flanker always from that point on?
Except when they stuck me at scrum half.
Okay. Sweetheart, what did you play?
I was destined to be a lock from day one. A few times they threw me on that prop, but lock was my lot in life.
Yeah, and that was your spot from then on, right? Now, when you guys first started playing for the university, and Rex was still the coach then, right? Or was he not?
No, go ahead, Jim.
Well, I started in the summer, and the following fall is when Rex came.
Oh, okay. It was after.
I started in spring of '72.
Okay.
And at that time, we had a guy. We called him Coach. He wasn't that involved, but we kind of centered on him because we were pretty loosely organized. His name was Bill McTeer. He was a graduate student from Ottawa. And he taught us some fundamentals, but he wasn't all that engaged. He didn't go on road trips with us. I mean, I think he had good rugby knowledge. I think he had a good rugby background, but he was too focused, believe it or not, on getting a college degree and
silly.
and not being a pre-maggot like we all were. So he hung with us, and then he left after '72. After he graduated, he went back up to Ottawa. And unfortunately, that next fall semester, there were quarters back then.
Okay.
This funny tongued guy from New Zealand showed up. And said, there's a rugby crew here, huh?
Yeah. Hey,
let's see what they're all about.
See what's going on here now. So, and then I've talked to him about this if you've seen some of the earlier stuff. Everybody's kind of got a little bit different version of how the transition occurred between being university players and then starting the Maggots. So, how do you remember it? What was sort of that defining moment that said, we can't keep playing for the university, we got to do something else?
As I recall, it got pretty obvious with the numbers and the competition, and there were enough of us that had graduated, and we told ourselves repeatedly that we're going to start a team. We need to start a city team. We got to say, and finally, it's kind of like the first New Zealand tour. We told ourselves enough times that we started believing it, and it was. I remember it's just a natural thing to happen that we'd grown out of the university and they had people coming in that they needed to get playing, and we wanted to take a little more control of what we were doing, and we certainly had what we needed. We had the players and the energy and the knowledge.
And it was the hardest part, I imagine, which is kind of the hardest part now, was finding matches, right? I mean, that had to be somewhat difficult at that time, I'm guessing.
Not really. We played pretty full schedules.
Oh, okay.
People knew us. Other teams around here knew us. I mean, there was some impetus from the university. They were kind of miffed that what little support they gave to non-athletic athletics at the time, that there were guys affiliated with the university players that weren't students. So but the group that had played through the university, and then some other outside guys came in. It was like Jim said, it was a natural coalescence. I kind of fell into it after I graduated in spring of 1974. I went active duty in the Air Force for 2 years. Got out and came back, and by that time, these guys who were still here, kind of formed the nucleus of, all right, we got enough, like Jim said, we got enough experience, we got enough talent, enough contacts, we can be our own organization, and it was no momentous decision.
No,
it just kind of natural.
A group thought process that all kind of jived together.
Just wanted to keep playing rugby.
That first year was interesting because it was the 77 when we've had the first state tournament. We've been practicing together. There wasn't a Maggot practice and a university. But then it got to the point that these two teams are going to end up playing each other for the first state championship. So the Maggots had to go find a place to practice. So the last couple of weeks of that season, we separated, and that was the...
Where was that? Where did you guys practice?
Is that when we started at Elm Park?
I think it must have been Elm Park at first, because I had bought a home over there in Lewis and Clark, and Jim was my roommate, and Menninghart was our third roommate for a while. A guy from the southeast who was a hell of a good player. So we didn't really have, 7th Street was
gone,
condemned by the city.
Kind of worked your way through that one, right?
Gotta leave that venue. And then there was a block away from the house where some of us lived in, and nobody used that park much, so we did.
Yeah, just became the spot, and then
Jim Erickson was working for one of the log log home builders up in Sealy at the time. He built us a scrum sled out of logs that would keep in my front yard, and then push down the block to the park.
Little warm up to get to the training, right? I'm just curious, seeing that, like what your neighbors thought about, like, what is that thing? You know, didn't even come up to you and ask, what is that thing that you keep moving all over the place?
They were sort of afraid to, except for, if you remember Pam Nybo lived kitty corner.
Yeah.
Probably the toughest nail biting woman I ever met in my life. She liked us. She was so ornery that she liked us.
Right.
And she, if any other neighbors had a problem, she mollified them for some reason. So, you know, they said God's a maggot. Well, she was one of his angels, I guess.
Yeah.
I know she wasn't God.
Yeah.
She was Lucifer's angel, maybe.
So how did the transition then occur to saying, okay, we're going to have this? Was the Montana Rugby Union formed at that point, or that was the beginning of it? Was holding that state tournament?
Yeah, that's where it all started coming together.
Okay.
I maybe giving us a little bit too much credit, but our split, I think, was big into the initial stages of the union. And I know Haler and Stevenson were real big that first year with the union.
And who was in it then? What were the teams? Do you remember?
Just about all of them. Helena, Billings, Bozeman, ourselves, Great Falls.
Cousin spearheaded a rugby effort when he was stationed in the Air Force up there.
I think Kalispell was the only one that wasn't an original that came in a couple years later.
Might be.
And then the natural next step was to have a fest after that? Because I know they were always at different times.
That first tournament we had, in fact I've brought the clipping from the timing from it, we called our first fest.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it was called that, but it was really a state tournament.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then after that, following that year, we split it and did two different, because the state tournament wasn't going to be in Missoula every year, and we still wanted to host a tournament and pattern it after Lethbridge's Whoop Up, like Bill said.
And they were, and what was that event up there? I've heard a little bit about it, but it was kind of a mini fest kind of thing, or mostly Canadian teams?
Yeah, let me digress a little bit, but I think, Jim, we got some impetus about the fest when we took our first real road trip. We went to Monterey. Yeah. We went to the Monterey tournament in spring of '74.
On the polo fields there.
Yeah, it was spring of '74. And we thought, that was we were out of our league playing there, because other than Stanford, which we played them scoreless until about 3 minutes to the full, and they broke away and put one over. But we were happy only losing 6-0, because after that
a sideline to that is Stanford, I think, was the defending national champions. We counted up our experience after that match, and we had, I think, 32 years of combined experience on 15 that started. There were 5 or 6 of us, me and Cousin and a few others. That was our first, we didn't even have the full year of rugby under our belts
yet.
Right,
for season number 1, yeah. 0.5.
Yeah, and here we are playing Stanford.
Oh, wow.
So that put the idea in our head that, a fest, having a festival, although we did it on our own terms, obviously. The Monterey Fest or Monterey tournament was super organized. Planted that idea in our head. So.
Oh, okay.
And other teams liked us. They always came here. They always had fun. We'd play them hard as we could, and sometimes we'd win, lots of times not. But we were used to, like I said, when I first started playing, Lethbridge was our closest match. All right, so you travel all day and all night, and then they host you and put you up and party up, and so that, that thought we kind of planted itself in our heads. That's what we do.
There, right?
That's part of the package here, and the fest just kind of fit into that psyche.
So that maggot kind of ethos has always been here from the beginning, right? Is that what you're telling me?
It was here when I started.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an environmental thing that this is what you do to survive and, travel for days. I mean, none of us had a reliable transportation back then. Half the time somebody's car would break down and people would end up having to hitchhike to the destination,
Speaking of the cars, one of the greatest rugby stories I'm part of is the 5 dead bodies in the cloud of rust.
Is that the car that had the
floorboards?
The floorboards?
Yeah, that was Pigpen's.
No, the Mohawks Chevy.
Oh.
The trip up to Calgary.
Well, I'm thinking of Pigpen's, the old girl. It was a 1993 or 1994 Rambler going up the trail, and you were on that. You were on that debacle, cousin. Broke down and died in Kettle Falls, Washington. And luckily, there was another car of guys coming back, so here's all these hitchhiking idiots. So the one car that worked had about 12 guys overloaded.
Did those kinds of trips lead to the idea like, hey man, we need a bus or we need something or we got to do something besides this? When did that come about? That idea?
We rented a bus for the spring tours.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's where the whole idea started. And again, I'm not real clear on it, but it seemed that it just was one of the progressions that eventually, we got our this, we got our that, now we got our fast, and we made our tour. Let's get a bus.
And did you guys continue to play and practice a little bit with the university, or did those things sort of cleave at that point?
Once the split was made, it was made.
Okay. But it was, I would imagine that that was, a steady supply of players, right? Like,
not as good as I thought it was going to be.
Oh wow! So more players came from just random people, or
we didn't really consider the U a farm team.
Okay.
It would kind of seem logical that they would be, but maybe there was some difference in attitudes.
Yeah.
Some of the university, I don't want to.
Go ahead.
maybe some of the university guys thought they were a little bit more elitist than us maggot types.
Okay.
Back to the bus thing. When we went to the Monterey tournament, we rented a school bus, and we realized, hey, buses can be fun. Right? Okay. So a lot of what the club evolved through circuitous paths involved thinking collectively that this is kind of fun.
Yeah, we like this.
That sort of underpins our word you use, ethos.
Yeah.
But it was practical too. You get everybody there, assuming the bus didn't break down, and knock on wood, most of the time it didn't, but not always. Instead of having a ragtag bunch of vehicles, like
people kind of
filtering in and the cloud of rust, and the old girl dying, and then you wonder if your team's going to be stranded in the wilderness, and
we're going to lose 4 or 5 guys for mechanical issues every match.
So it was a practical consideration too.
Yeah. Huh.
But mostly a fun one.
Yeah, I mean, having ridden on the bus a lot of times over the years, I can see how the first ones people thought, oh yeah, this is good. Like, so here's another question, and I know this is something I just have to ask everybody because, again, there are differences of memory and differences of time periods. How did the Maggot name come about, in your recollection?
Correct me here, Jim. We played mostly Canadian teams back in the early days. Other than Ellensburg, and we did go out to Seattle and play UW and I think a couple of BC teams in a small tournament that spring and got slaughtered. Mostly we were hanging with the Canadians. And I believe, and they like coming down here for a couple of reasons. One, Canada's so regimented, it's illegal to have fun out there.
Right.
But they come down here, and it's legal to have one.
Do
It's
whatever they
legal to
want,
have fun. Two, it's fun to have fun with the pre-Maggots,
Right.
the Missoula rugby guys. And they would come down here and let their hair down and do stuff that they couldn't do back up there, and have a great time. And they love this. And one of the, if I remember right, correct me, Jim, one of the organizers, or one of the principals of the Calgary Hornets said, you guys are just a bunch of maggots.
Was he being complimentary, or was
He was.
it was a positive association.
Yeah, it was a positive comment, and we thought, maybe we are. And we're not too proud to call ourselves that. And that's to my recollection. That's how it stuck. That name stuck.
That's same with me. It's somewhere along those lines that it was the Canadians that thought we were a bunch of maggots.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Canada.
Yeah. And then of course the All-Maggots was for Rex, just to stick another needle in his.
And was it always black?
Yeah.
From the get go, it was that was the kit.
And the Rosetta was the reason that it's what it is. The English rose, and the maggots, the petals on that rose are the maggots, and it worked. It pissed Rex off.
Did you guys both go to New Zealand?
In '78, yes.
Yeah. Well, and did that open? Because I've heard some of the other people talking about it. That was kind of an eye opener, obviously, of that rugby's not our little world in Montana and Canada. That there's this other thing that exists all around the world. Any sort of memories from that tour that became part of the maggot lore?
Oh, I think we got brought a lot back with us, on the field, off the field, attitude wise. The thing that I recall the most, being struck with the most from that tour, was the history, the depth of it, and the structure of the clubs.
Okay.
There were the players, and then the guys that used to play, the old boys, and they all had the clubhouse and traditions. And I remember all of us kind of thinking, boy, that's neat. Just another step in our education in rugby. And I think that's where we got the idea that eventually we're going to have a clubhouse, and we're going to have our own pitch. And
so New Zealand was not necessarily a turning point, but an eye-opening point for the club.
Yeah.
And what attitude did you bring back from there?
Well, we realized, hey, rugby's actually an institution.
Right.
It's not just a fun time avocation like we were, which it was, but this is we would want to emulate that, and of course when we got hosted, the center of activity, of course, with the clubhouses, and each little community we played in had an established clubhouse with a semi-formality to it. I mean, you didn't,
coat and tie, and
you didn't talk bad about the Queen or that kind of thing in their clubhouse. And there was old boys that had quit playing 20, 30, 50 years ago that would kind of hang in the background.
kind of like us.
Well, like we are now, but well, we and our opponent teammates were partying up and having some fun.
Yeah.
But there was always this kind of background, kind of oversight, you want to call it, like, okay, you guys are young and full of piss and vinegar and having fun, but rugby's, it's a religion here. Obviously, it's a religion in New Zealand.
Right.
There's certain ways to conduct yourself and respect this institution. And that kind of struck us a little bit. But then the idea of having a facility that old boys like us could come back to and promote the evolution of the club and the organization. Yeah, that stuck with us pretty hard.
Cool, and here we are.
Yep.
This many years later. After that first few years, now fests are going, and now you've got a bus. And what was kind of that next stage of the club's development, sort of in the early '80s? What changed, and what did it become more organized? Did you get more matches? What? Because I see a lot of '80 to '85 and late '80s where there were a lot of people have memories of that time as being sort of a golden era of Maggot rugby.
I think the thing I remember most clearly about that middle '80s period is that we'd play 40, 45 matches in the spring season.
Wow.
We, from the time the snow was gone until the state tournament, and then into the summer with the summer trips, we'd usually travel with 2 teams or real close to 2 teams, and everywhere you went, you played 2 or 3 matches.
Yeah.
Tournaments, a lot of times we'd enter 2 teams, and so we had a lot of people and a lot of competition, a lot of traveling.
And what were the tournaments that you guys mostly went to around that time? I know that you said Lethbridge, and who else had tournaments?
Pocatello had a pretty good tournament. There was always tournaments in Salt Lake City. Spokane, the Fools tournament.
When Dave O'Boys moved out to Billings, Billings tried to. But part of that, to add to what Jim was saying, is I think the MRU, and Skip can speak way more to this because he was more involved in those politics. And the MRU really energized our playing schedule. For one, you didn't have to drive the frickin' Lethbridge to your closest game. You could go to Butte or Helena,
right,
or Great Falls. And I mean, not that we didn't mind traveling, but it
not all the time.
It made it a lot more practical to play more games. As I said, I think that was a pretty good catalyst. And it just so happened at the time, the other Montana clubs, they've ebbed and flowed like lots of clubs have, but across the board, most of the Montana clubs were pretty solid back then. I mean, solid in as far as numbers and organization, and level of play. So it was a viable. It was a viable arrangement.
And besides the Maggots, who were consistently the best teams in sort of that era?
University and Bozeman, originally. There was never anything more fun than beating Bozeman.
Yeah. Billings, I give Billings a head. Dave Oberweiser did a pretty good job getting those guys together, and he had some tough guys.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't coalesce if they would have coalesced as a team, they could have been dominant, really, because he had good talent back there. He was a good organizer.
That's one of the things I remember shaking my head with the teammates with is how come we keep winning? A team like Billings with that size, and they'd always have 3 or 4 guys that were like David or other players that were really good organizers, experienced, but they just couldn't get the continuity. They'd have 5 or 6 new players every time you played them. And
they didn't have the flow. They didn't have the flow. And got to give Oberweiser his due, because he had a bad name when he left Missoula, because he had formed a team called the Cool Blues.
Haven't heard this.
And the Cool Blues, Oberweiser with football. His father was head coach at Anaconda High for forever. And Dave was a hell of a good athlete and tough guy. He didn't quite have the Maggot ethos. I don't want to say he was a proudful guy. Maybe that's part of it.
But he
I can run a bunch of guys can take you Maggot dudes on. So he hired He recruited a bunch of ex-football players, half of them Samoans. Back in those days, half of the UM Grizzly football team was from Samoa or Hawaii, and they were big, tough guys. And Dave knew them all, and so he coalesced them into a team called the Cool Blues. They were called the Cool Blues because they didn't have a uniform, but he got an extra set of uniforms from Anaconda High School, and their color was blue. And so they'd play us, and one-on-one they could rule. But as much as they tried, their focus was on how to do things the football way and not the rugby way, and we'd always find a way to put a few tries against them and piss them off and beat them. And there was a grudging love-hate relationship there for a while. Then that crew, the Cool Blue crew, dispersed, and Dave went out to Billings and did more of a pure rugby kind of organization thing. But there was a little bit of hard feelings left over from the Cool Blue days and Obi's involvement with them.
I didn't have any problem with the Cool Blues. I think I'm one of the few people who can say I never lost to them.
Now, I don't know if you guys were around still at this time, because I'm not sure if that would have been your age group or not. Whose idea was it, and when did the Flies start?
That was a natural offshoot.
Okay.
And I don't know if it was from New Zealand, but we were aware of old boy rugby. And I'm probably more from California, because I remember talking about the Golden Gate Masters before we had enough for a 7-a-side Masters team. And we finally had enough and started going down there and playing that. And the name was natural.
Obvious, right?
What else are you going to call yourselves?
Yeah, I think that was more it. I don't know, when we went to Kiwi Land in '78, that we saw any influence of any old boys. It seemed to me, in fact, my memory is, it seemed kind of dispiriting that once you quit playing A-side for your local club team in New Zealand, you were one of these guys on the back wall watching the young guys play, and that's all you did. I mean, you were just a spectator from that point for the rest of your life. And we didn't like that idea, because we didn't think we'd ever get old and not want to play, right? And
none of us
did.
did.
As Jim said, we saw clubs in other places in California that had viable old boys. They weren't playing A-side, but they were still pretty feisty and full of piss and vinegar, and kept playing. And we can do that.
Yeah. And was it mostly the other Montana teams he played, or was that like an on-tour thing or kind of fest? I don't
know that we played, that any of the other Montana teams ever came up with an old boys team.
They never had the depth. They never had the continuity and the depth. The guys hanging on after their A or B side playing days. So
I think for us it was just another avenue to get some rugby in.
Another natural evolution of we want to keep playing. Yeah. My first matches with the Maggots were actually with the Flies back in the day, so I have a little bit of a thing for that, even though I'm not sure I was old enough. But I had the both bald and obesity exemption going. It was good.
When we first started going with the Flies, I was still president, and I was a captain, and I was the autocratic asshole that I was. I refused to play an old boys team till I actually qualified, and here I am not playing in an old boys match in the fest, and there's Hollywood out there playing.
And he's younger, right?
Yeah, he's 5 years younger than I am.
So let's talk about some of these guys. Who sticks out in your memory? It could be just an individual thing, or it could be their overall demeanor, personality of somebody who was, in your mind, a true maggot, somebody who sort of exemplified the whole thing, even if they were only here for a while, or just something that sticks out in your memory.
Well, the top thing the crowning jewel on that whole discussion is sitting right back here, the skipper. But there were some guys that I look back on that when I was coming up, when I was young, that were incredibly good to me. Took the time to teach me and encourage me. Two of them that come to mind right away are Pigpen and Dave Oberweiser.
Okay.
I remember Dave Oberweiser telling me, he says, "You're not always going to be a skinny kid." Oh yeah?
Well, you're wrong on that one, right?
But yeah, they were both kind of role models for me. Yeah, of course, Nick owning the bar wasn't bad.
Always a good skill. How about you, sweetheart?
You know, obviously Skip's right up there on top. He was a hard charger, always has been, always will be. You know, if you were dogging it, if your attitude wasn't right, you know, Skip wasn't afraid to say shit if he had a mouthful, right?
And heaven forbid you steal the bus.
And he could back it up. He'd back it up. You know, and sometimes when you felt like you were not doing your best and feeling dogging yourself, you think Skip at the back of your head is going to kick your ass for being a lame ass, right? Beyond that, there were just any number of guys probably that either on or off the field were kind of inspired you to keep going. I don't know that I could name other names above the others, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. No, the other question that I like to ask is just straight on the pitch, doesn't matter what kind of, who's the best player you ever played with on this Maggot Club?
Bill Dahlgren. Period.
You're not the first person to say that.
Dahlgren. And there's a couple others that I'd like to throw in there too.
Yeah.
Dave Taskela. Although, yeah, he played a year for the Maggots.
Yeah. Turkey.
Yeah, short little fly half. And another one I was partial to the end of my career, playing wise, was Mark Armstrong. Scrum half that had started in Seattle and came over here. And
yeah, I forgot about him.
if he could have taken the time to get himself into top shape, I mean, he was married and trying to get a career started, and he'd have been absolutely unstoppable. I don't think there was a single match I played with him that at some point during that match I just had one of those, fuck, I'm glad he's on my team.
Those guys are great, right?
You know, Larry Menard's another name, though.
Yeah.
Menard went to New Zealand with us, and then hung for that fall season, and then went back to. He was from Georgia, I think.
Indiana.
Atlanta.
No, Midwest, was it?
Yeah, the Menard's from Midwest. Kaiserling was from Georgia.
No, he was
Yeah, that's right.
Atlanta.
Menard was, pound for pound, probably one of the better players to put on a Maggot boot.
Huh. Yeah, they're just.
And he ended up playing at a way higher level than what he could dial into up here. But Armstrong was, like Jim said, you were glad Armstrong was on your team.
Is there a year that you guys remember where you felt like this was the team that, I know it's hard sometimes because it blends over different years, different guys, come into different, but is there a time when you think this was the best Maggot team that I played on? I know it's hard to do that, but a state championship team or something, or just a year in particular. Does anything stick out?
I think I'd have to go back and do some studying on that.
Yeah, to look at that, because
a lot of times we start the season with a real strong side, and then by the time we're about halfway through the union season, we've got enough guys hurt and gone working, and that you just never got it all together.
If I had to pin that down, it's a hard one to pin. I would say state tournament in Helena in '78. We were firing on all cylinders in that tournament, and we had
dominating.
We had some decent competition then. The university was our championship match of that tournament. Steve Brown Beaner played for the university then. And they had some tough guys, and they came at us hard. And we slug. It was a slugfest. That final game was a slugfest. We prevailed by how much? Don't ask me. Probably not a lot, but a few. That would be in my mind anyway. But you could make that argument for other years too, I guess.
So this is your recollection. You know what I mean? It's everybody's got something that sticks in their mind from how they played or how that team or who you faced up against during that year, that kind of thing, and it can be different for everybody. I do have the other question where I think sometimes looking back at that time period and seeing where we are now, sitting in the clubhouse in the president's room bar, is this how you thought it would go, or is it how you hoped it would go?
I remember having confidence that it was gonna happen in spite of us. And I think there's something to what I said earlier, that we tell ourselves something enough times, we start believing it, and it starts happening. And so much of my part with this club was predicated on that we saw something in New Zealand or something in California or something in Canada that we thought represented rugby the way we wanted it to be, and we'd try to apply it to what we had.
Yeah. Which we did. No doubts in my mind. Once we saw the structure in New Zealand with the clubhouses and the organization and the individuals associated with that, we knew. I never doubted someday we'd be here. Wanted to put a timeline on it, but knew it would be a continuity thing. First off, those of us who played 50 years ago are still 99% of us are still vertical and still staying with the club emotionally and supportive wise. And the club has engendered the spirit, not to give ourselves undue credit, that I think was instilled back in day one.
Yeah.
And the club has had its ups and downs years. Maggots have always had ups and down years, given change in personnel and various other factors. But it's an ongoing. It's an embedded institution.
Well, I can tell you this. I mean, as somebody who's spent a lot of time at other rugby clubs and hosted a lot of rugby clubs, and in my business, everybody in America knows who the Maggots are. And if they haven't been to Maggot Fest, they want to. They've heard of it. They know somebody that went there. They used to be a part of a club that went, and that kind of thing. And that's got to make you feel good, right? That this sort of representative that feeling that you guys started with is now something that's admired around the rugby community in the United States.
Along those lines, something that I have been very impressed with is how through the years the club, and I think John Ottinger, his long tenure as president,
the second president for life.
Yeah, going from those early times, being a part of that, a big part of that, and then through the evolution to where the club is now, I'm incredibly impressed with how well the club now is approaching things the same way we tried to. That there actually is, I think, a true maggot, and there are a lot of things I think that draw people, and some people leave and some people stay, and I think it was started, like Bill said, with what we established and passed on, but it's the fact that the clubhouse is here. It's not just those of us that saw clubhouses in New Zealand that wanted it. It didn't happen until a couple generations of players later. And
well, there's an awful lot of rugby teams and clubs that don't exist anymore. because they didn't have that structure and they didn't have that. I mean, I think one of the things that prevents a club from faltering or disappearing is exactly what you guys are talking about, which is having a bunch of old guys who were there, cohesive, and can provide understanding of the tradition and understanding of the desire to be a certain way, and that clearly comes through to the club now, I think, just from somebody who's only been here for 30 years or 28 years or whatever it is.
It's that cohesiveness, though, and that maybe part of it's environmental, because a lot of the guys that played back in the day are still here, still grubbing for a living, and here in River City. A good contrast to that is the Bats, Bay Area touring side, was one of the most fearsome, best run, best played clubs in the Bay Area for 100 years. In fact, one of our guys, Blondie, went down and played good ball with them. And then all of a sudden, overnight, their leadership, the organization evaporated, and they're a distant memory.
Well, all those NorCal clubs, many of them meld into each other. Golden Gate and San Francisco Rugby Club became one club, which is kind of sad, but at the same time, at least there's some remnant of sort of that tradition. I know there's been a lot more of mergers. I don't think that's ever a thing with the Maggots. I think it's too unique.
Yeah, we're unadulterated.
It just goes to show that something I've always believed is true: is there's no shortage of stupid people in this world.
And how do you guys still? I know I've seen you out there, but it's still fun to go out and watch the Maggots play rugby on a Saturday. I mean, that's got to be something to give you. It gives me a certain amount of joy to be able to come out and say, "Hey, I played for this club, and now this club is still playing, and I can come out and watch them and have a beer." Right?
I've always had this sentiment that watching rugby is kind of like watching pornography. The real thing is so much better. Playing it is so much better than watching it.
Better pencil that quote in, Gopher. Put that in the annals.
It's in.
Oh boy.
Well, it's like Jim's right. It's satisfying.
Yeah.
All right, we had our day, we had our moment. Now it's satisfying to see the next couple of generations below us still carrying on, doing the same things we did.
In those early days of playing, it must have been a little bit more difficult to get better, just because it seemed, not a lot of coaching and not a lot of other rugby to look at. So your getting better, I feel, must come from when you get beat by these better teams. Did you guys have that experience?
Yeah, we studied Canadian rugby because those were our main competitors.
And they'd sit us down. I remember playing the Hornets. They just freaking thrashed us. And they had a little flanker who was a Mr. Canada bodybuilder, little black guy.
Yeah, I remember that. I can't remember. Yeah, I remember that guy.
But he sat me down at the drink up, and for the better part of 2 hours explained everything he did to me and how he did it, why he did it.
Yeah.
And the last thing he said to me that night is, the next time we play, you better not make those mistakes again. This guy with biceps.
Yeah.
But that's where we learned. And I think
they had the Canadians. That's one of the reasons we like playing. They had an affinity for us, and they wanted us to get better. And they weren't proprietary about their information. I mean, they said, "Here's what you do," like Jim said.
Yeah.
Here's how you run. Here's how you run different aspects of the game, and technically and strategically, and we were smart enough to listen to at least some of it.
Yeah.
And I think it also explains the at least the early dominance we had in the Union. How many of the first 20 did we win? Was the fact that we were the only Montana team that would leave Montana. And that's where we got so much of it, and the team's beating the shit out of us. You don't learn anything.
We would not have grown without our widening our net of experience. We wouldn't have.
Right.
We would have atrophied.
Right. And you have to get out there and play those better teams, otherwise it.
Yeah, and not be afraid to lose. Not be afraid to take your hard lessons on the pitch.
There's not a whole lot to learn when you're playing a new Montana team that's like we were with 30 years of experience and they're starting 15. You go out and thrash them. You don't learn anything. They don't learn anything.
No. I think that's probably the greatest threat to the Maggots now is not anything internal. It's the external problem of there's less rugby to be had in Montana, and it necessitates the Maggots going further afield and playing more rugby in other places.
But that's not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing. It just makes it more difficult.
I mean, Boise, Salt Lake are, all right, they're semi-serious road trips, but nothing that would have daunted us back in the day if we'd have had the venues to play in. Boise, I don't remember having in the early days. Salt Lake certainly did, but because we played Salt Lake coming back, we played in Park City coming back from the Monterey Fest. But
you were gone for the Salt Lake or for the Caldwell massacre, weren't you?
Yeah, I was.
What's the Caldwell
serving our country?
We went down to Boise. There's this new team in Boise that wants some matches. Well, okay, we'll go down there. We'll play them. Frickin' Snake River. And we didn't take a scrum half down. And that was the first time they did it to me. So here we are against Snake River, scrum half. You gotta be kidding.
Yeah, that was a tough baptism for you, Jim.
But what Bill's saying is right on. We knew, and the fixtures guys would come to a meeting and say, well, we got one lined up this year in so and so place. Hey, that's kind of cool. You ever been there? You know anything about those guys? No. Well, this will be fun.
Yeah. Okay.
Is there a road trip or a set of matches, a tournament or something that sticks in your mind that for either the combination of the trip, the people, the matches, or something that you think about as not necessarily a high point, but a really good point?
5 dead bodies in a cloud of rust.
What was that?
Sweetheart or Cousins got that in the minutes from the Maggot reunion, the best road trips. There were 5 of us. It was just a goat and pony show from the start. And we weren't supposed to take Malika's '63 Chevy. One of the things I remember so vividly, and Bill described it so well, we're on the main drag in Calgary, and everybody's drunk or beyond, and we're at a red light and we're going to make a U-turn. And Malika says, I can't see back there, are we clear? And Cousin turns around, there's a Mountie right next car behind us. He said, yeah, you're clear. It's about halfway through the U-turn.
I'm guessing a bus is not allowed to do U-turns.
No, we were in a car.
Oh, in car, okay.
But there just all kinds of stuff went on in that, and we had some great rugby. I think it was probably the Hornets and the Rams. Played at Kingsland. There's just the people there that were in the car, the fact that we survived. And I can't remember if that was the trip. No, it was when we were still at the university. We were coming back, going through the border crossing, and the first thing that happened when we got there, we were going to be real clever bringing the Canadian beer back.
Right.
So took the spare tire out, put a bunch of it in there, and then we put the sweaty jerseys on top of it. And they pull us over and open the trunk, and first thing the guy does is push the jersey aside. Yeah. You didn't really think that would work.
Nice try.
And nothing happened. And then he said, oh, by the way, any of you guys know a guy named Jim Erickson? And we look at each other, Jim Erickson. You know Jim Erickson? Oh, Pigpen! I said, yeah, he left his wallet here. His wallet, that's about that thick. Receipts and half of a dollar bill. And, and it was, as soon as we saw the wallet, we knew who he was talking about.
That's obviously his.
But there are stories like that you get a group like this around and you get going, and that reminds somebody of another one, and there are just so many great memories and stories.
There's 100 of them. The one I remember, I think it was Cousin's first road trip in fall of '73 up to Trail, BC. And we all left in car. We didn't have a bus then, so it was individual cars. And a bunch of the guys, Pigpen, Jim Erickson had I think it was a '63 or '64 Rambler that the doors didn't work, so it had rope in there. You had to tie the doors shut. You're bouncing down the highway and trying not to fall out. And a bunch of guys rode with him. And the old his car, of course, we're all names for a vehicle. And
right.
His was the old girl. The old girl breathed her last in Kettle Falls, Washington, which is in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, about an hour and a half, 2 hours short of Trail, BC, which is just north of the border, not too far. But luckily, there was another guy playing with us by the name of John Harper. If you remember Harper.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was a smoke jumper.
He was a jumper.
Yeah, he was a jumper. He being a rich, overpaid smoke jumper. he had a nice, fairly new car. And so he picked up the refugees from Pigpen's old girl and crammed about 8 or 10 guys into his car.
It was a Duster.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't a big car,
yeah.
no. And cruised on up the trail, and we had a fun time. We like those trail guys.
Yeah.
It seemed like we could have more fun. It's my prejudice, but more fun in BC than Alberta. Alberta, Canada's a very regimented country. In Alberta, the drinking rules are a lot less lax than they are certainly here. BC seemed like they were a little bit more open, right?
Yeah.
So, but we knew we could have fun with those guys, and we could play them competitively. I can't remember if we beat them, then, but I'm sure we played them pretty evenly over the years. I think it was kind of a 50-50 split. But anyway, so we all get up to Trail, and we're having our game on Saturday, and they took us to the armory, the Canadian National Guard Army, wherever the hell it was. A couple of our guys were military dudes. And that's where we partied, and they brought in women and food and plenty of beer, and we're having a good old whoop up. Sunday, I think we played a survivors game, and then it's headed back south because it was on the weekend. The Sunday that we were there was the day before Thanksgiving, right? Because Canadian Thanksgiving is, I think, the second Monday in October.
Right.
All right. So some of us it was with Harper, hung back, and I think the reason was, I'll try to be politically correct here, but there was a gal there that was a friend of the Trail Rugby Club that was an exotic, you can call her multicultural gal, big, tall, dark-skinned woman who took a liking to Harper. Okay. So, we're being sports, okay, we don't want to interrupt this guy's love intentions.
Little guy code.
Yeah. So we said, and one of their guys, their big prop, Vern, I can't remember his last name, was a pretty gregarious guy. He said, well, you guys hang for the night, and we'll kick you off in the morning, Monday morning, and Mr. Harper can have his love pursuits.
Right.
Fair enough. Well, it turns out, when Harper drove his rig up there, from after he picked up the dead bodies in Kettle Falls, at some point he was too drunk to drive, which, not surprising. So Lee Dilley took over driving because Lee was the most sober. I don't know if he was sober, he was the most
sober, yeah.
So he drove him across the border. And so Lee Dilley has Harper's car keys in his jacket pocket all weekend. Not thinking about it, just forgetting about it.
Yeah.
So we get ready late Sunday night. Harper's done with his extracurricular work. Well, we better head down because I think back then the border closed at like 10. It wasn't a 24-hour border. All right, so we're all kind of stumbling around. All right, let's load up and head south. No keys. No keys. And finally Harper remembers, oh shit, Lee Dilly had them, but Lee had already left early.
He's already gone. He got to ride with somebody else.
So, fortunately, those guys in trail know, there was a small town, they know everybody throughout Western Canada. So they called, they got immediate call down to the border. Hey, if you see this car with Lee Dilly, stop that son of a bitch.
Tell him
to come around. We need the keys. But it was too late.
He'd already gone through it.
He'd already passed. Borders closed. It's the Sunday night before Thanksgiving. We got no keys in this car.
It's not looking good.
Yeah. And Cousins was with us. I can't remember who else. Who else other than you, me, Hart. There was a couple other guys.
As good as that story
All
is,
right,
it's
so-
even better if you knew John Harper.
Yeah.
So Dilly's already gone through the border.
Yeah, so, but it must have been Vern running the show with us, or taking us under sanctuary. Here again, it's like 9 o'clock, almost 10 o'clock Sunday night before Thanksgiving. Vern goes, well, I know a locksmith. Calls a guy, makes it, calls him out of bed.
Probably.
I mean, who normal wants to go out and save a bunch of dipshit maggots
Sunday night.
before Thanksgiving Day? Sure enough, the guy comes down, he jiggers up the ignition, makes a key set for us. Of course, it's too late to go anywhere because the border's closed by then. So we bunked down with him, and sure enough, next morning we get a car that works and headed south. So we progressed down south. Of course, we're not done partying yet. And it's not Thanksgiving Day for us. It's a Monday. And if I remember right, Cousin can back me or refute me here. We basically cruised into Missoula, maybe coming down Evero Hill in Harper's car, and Harper's comatose by then, so somebody was driving.
Yeah.
Maybe it was Dog, and he was probably responsible. We ran out of gas. So we're base Evero Hill, we're out of gas, we're just totally shot. Cousin goes, well, I'll be here. I'll hitchhike into town, get a couple of gas cans, and get Miller, which is the name of your truck, and bring Miller back here and fill you up, and we'll make it back. Long story short, or short story long, probably Monday night, 10, 11 o'clock at night, we're back from our road trip to trail. And that was the end of our happy story.
And there's always that.
Just one you having to is memorable because
just
of all the brain cells that died between then and now, those are the ones that kind of stick with you.
some of them do.
If Harper would have had an attention span then, he'd have been a hell of a maggot. He was a tremendous athlete, big, strong kid, but saved my ass on the first fire I jumped. Suiting up, getting ready to get on the airplane. He'd been jumping 6, 8 years before I started. Comes running up and says, you got any Copenhagen? And I looked at my pocket and I had about one pinch left.
Yeah.
And he said, here, take this, and don't ever let that happen again.
Rookie.
That's the kind of guy he was.
Yeah. Was there a time in the early going of the Maggots that everything felt like it just coalesced at the right time, and we decided, okay, we're going to be this team that's going to dominate Montana rugby? Did you get that feeling right away, or were you just playing rugby? You know what I mean?
I don't know if it was as a viable, strong, on the pitch team, but I think when we got back from New Zealand, we realized that this is for real, and we're for real. We just accomplished something that not very many teams had done, and had a great time, came back with great memories. It's going to happen again, and
we knew we were real and we're going to keep it going.
that's what
I don't know if I'd call it an epiphany, but it was close to that.
Yeah.
The realization. You know, we pulled this off. We brought a hell of a lot of bodies down there, and played 12 games, spent a month touring the country partly under Rex's auspices, partly on our own, and yeah, we knew we were the real deal.
I remember standing in the aisle on the airplane on the way down, talking to Dewey. We just both kind of looked at each other and said, "We're really doing this.
We're on this plane, like
it's happening."
Yeah. Do you remember the clubs that you played down there? Because it must have been really hard to back in the day. You had to write letters or I mean,
well,
how did
Rex
Rex
organized the itinerary.
Oh, okay.
And he was savvy enough to match us with clubs that were, you know, that wouldn't slaughter us.
Right.
I mean, that were at least somewhat on a par. That's giving them too much. We were not on a par with hardly any of them, although we won 4 games down there.
Okay.
But at least he kind of equalized.
He figured it out.
The dynamic.
But we started out in Dunedin and played
Otago.
3 against Otago that were scheduled, and then myself and somebody informally scheduled against the Otago Law School. And that wasn't one that Rex had on the schedule, and that was the first match we won. Then we went up to Christchurch for, I think, 2 in Christchurch.
There were, I don't remember one, it was ugly.
Yeah.
That one was ugly.
The real ugly's coming. Then we go to Waipawa, little tiny town about the size of Lolo, in middle of the island, and just had
North Island.
Yeah, just had a blast.
Yeah.
And then
went to Te Puke.
Yeah, up to the great Te Puke debacle. 2 matches going at the same time, and we'd split our team fairly evenly. I was the captain of one team, and I don't know who was captain.
Skip was.
Who was captain of the other one. And I look over at the 2 Te Puke teams warming up, and it's night and day. I mean, one of them has got the nice crisp uniforms, and their socks are all pulled up. They've all got shiny shoes. And the other ones kind of look like us, you know.
Yeah.
They're the same uniforms. And I put 2 and 2 together and saw where the ragtag team was. My team down here.
Yeah, we're over here.
Yeah, Skip's team, you go on. We won. They got thrashed severely.
Well, that's just good captain.
And we got demoralized. I was on the wrong squad.
And what happened?
And I never.
Don't you want?
And we were just like defeated halfway through the match. We were defeated.
Yeah.
And Skip just gets into our face, just
don't you want
blood pressure off the frickin' chart. Don't you want to win? Don't you want to win? You fucking pussies. I don't know if we did or not. We were sort of more afraid of Skip than we were the guys that were putting boots to us. But it was not a happy. That game didn't have a happy ending.
The reason that happened, I found out that evening, is that another American team had been through and advertised themselves as being just a social club, and they weren't. I don't know who they were.
Right.
But they gave Te Puke a hell of a run. And Te Puke decided that ain't going to happen to our A side again.
Yeah, we're not going to do that.
I don't remember that part.
But after Te Puke, the last stop was in Kaipara Flats on the north of Auckland. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that was where I had my greatest moment in rugby. I played second row for Kaipara Flats in a second game.
Did you do the haka before?
No. I'm walking with a Maori whose little finger is bigger than I have my arm around him, my feet are just kind of swinging on the ground like a cartoon. But it was great, and we all had great fun. And
yeah.
You played for their second side?
Yeah.
Did we win?
No, not against the Maggots. It was a regular match. We played. We played like on a Thursday or on a Friday. This was a Saturday and Sunday was a regular match, but we didn't play that day. It was
Okay. I don't remember if we beat them or. That's where we had the big bean blow up. Remember, who was that guy that
yeah,
came
I
with
remember.
us? I can't remember, Steve somebody. Anyway, he was kind of a pretty boy. He didn't play much. Anyway, we're sitting around, so we're at their clubhouse, but it's nice out night, so they got I got a campfire going.
Yeah.
We're sitting around the campfire drinking beer. Somebody had this big can of baked beans, like a big fucking can.
Costco size.
And somebody, yeah, right.
Who put the beans in the
And somebody had the bright idea, well, we'll heat them up, we'll just throw them in the coals, right? Okay, and then we'll eat warm beans. I don't know what the thought was.
Yeah, that was, somebody was thinking.
But of course, we all forgot about it until these beans exploded. I mean, and whoever's sitting around the fire was just covered with boiling beans, flames and embers, and we all blew back.
We all looked like we had terminal acne.
Like we were in Chernobyl when the reactor blew. We're going, what the fuck? Who did that?
Who's
Maybe that was the beans.
Jimmy, did you do that?
Jimmy,
No,
you did that.
no.
Fuck.
I know better than that.
I don't know who the guilty party
No
was.
one's. It's one of those mysteries, right? Nobody's fessed up to it yet.
But Kypera Flats was again one of those venues where there was an organization, there was an established clubhouse, there was respect for that clubhouse, respect for the teams that represented their little community, which they were a small town, that instilled in us the idea.
Yeah, we gotta have this. Let me ask you one final question. Australia 2027. Anybody gonna go to World Cup?
Are you going to guarantee me I'll be alive now?
I can't guarantee that, but
See, well, that's 4 years, that's 75 years old.
I'm going.
no. Okay.
I have to invoke the Mickey Mantle on that. If I'd have known I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself.
Right. Right.
Which
Hey,
is total bullshit.
Yeah. It's been really fun talking to you guys. I appreciate it.
I appreciate
Wonderful.
you
Oh
doing this.
yeah, Matt.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Nice job, guys.
This is really fun for me. I really enjoy this stuff. So.